Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning in our city council work session. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Cheatham. Cheatham.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Lurick.
Here.
Mangum.
Here.
Mansfield. Nichols.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Glad.
Here. Thank you. We'll go ahead and get started with agenda item number 2 is American Falls FAA Ag Issues Team Presentation. Representatives from the American Falls Futures Farmers of America FAFA Ag Issues Team will give a presentation on the Farm Workers Modernization Act. And I guess I should ask their leader, their good leader, or former Mayor Beatty from American Falls. Is your team ready, or do you need a second?
We're ready.
They just walked in the door, so okay.
So if it's all right, Mayor Glad will just present.
Let's do that, right? Yeah, absolutely. If we need to move that row of chairs, we will.
So I think a lot of you are new faces, at least to me. Mayor Glad, I've known you for a long time.
For a while.
The FFA Ag Issues, let's go all the way over there.
Let me see, just a minute. Rick, can you hear the mayor? Can you hear him?
Barely.
Can you speak
I
louder?
can't see the team now, but I can hear.
Okay, are these microphones on?
They're on, yeah. We just need to speak louder a little bit.
Can we move one? over?
No, we can't.
Okay. Okay, so you're just gonna have to speak loud. Use your big kid voices. So, FFA Ag Issues picks a topic every year that's relevant to our local area, Idaho, or the nation. The purpose of the ag issue is to present both sides of an issue, not necessarily to tell you what the solution to the issue is, but to present both sides equally so that you can make an informed decision. The team would certainly welcome questions. If you ask them what they think the solution is after the presentation, they'll tell you, but they're not supposed to come out with that in the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team. Samantha?
The meeting room will come to order. We are now holding a meeting of the United States House Agriculture Committee. The question we are debating today is should the Farm Workforce Modernization Act be authorized by this body and move to the full House for a vote. My name is Samantha Diaz, and I am representing Glenn Thompson of Pennsylvania, the chair of this committee. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, less than 2% of the U.S. population work in production agriculture, yet an estimated 73% of those workers are immigrants. Today, 48% of those immigrants don't have the proper work authorization they need to maintain legal eligibility to work in the U.S., meaning they would be subject to deportation if apprehended. This raises issues for farmers all across America who rely on immigrants for labor-intensive work that sustains their farm and keeps them financially stable. The H-2A program provides a work visa designed to fill in temporary agricultural jobs. The current H-2A program works to solve these problems, but not without its flaws. This program may temporarily solve the labor shortage, but when it comes to year-round work, it fails to provide a long-term solution due to the time limit placed on the workers' visas. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act potentially reforms this program to ensure stability within the system, provide security and opportunities for employers, employees, and the economy. However, some feel that this bill has imperfections. They assert that workers will still experience abuse and injustice, while others think that immigrant families will flood the market with low-wage labor, and that the new E-Verify mandate will take away half of our workforce. Finally, agricultural processing businesses protest against this legislation because they are not included in it. Testimony for and against this legislation will be offered today by 6 representatives affected by this issue. Those speaking in favor of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act will now introduce themselves, who they represent, and their position on the issue.
I'm Shaylee Taylor, representing the farmers and ranchers who produce the food that feeds America. Currently, 20% of what I produce is exported to help feed the rest of the world. It's expected that by 2050, production will need to increase by 60% to meet global demand. We need a reliable workforce.
Based on most recent USDA Census of Agriculture, an estimated 2.4 million farm workers labor on our nation's farms and ranches. According to the Farm Worker Justice, 44% of those workers are undocumented. Their contributions to America's food security are essential, yet oftentimes overlooked. My name is Ariana Chiapa, and I stand before you representing undocumented farm workers. This bill will help workers like me and will benefit all Americans.
Agriculture is the backbone of our nation. With a growing need for agricultural workers, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act will surely help reconstruct America's flawed H-2A program. I am Joaquin Morales, speaking on behalf of Representative Mike Simpson, who is a co-sponsor of this legislation.
Thank you. Those speaking in opposition of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act will now introduce themselves, who they represent, and their position on the issue.
I'm Stephanie Rosales, speaking as an ag processing business owner. This bill is incomplete. It does nothing for ag processors. Agriculture businesses struggle to keep a stable workforce too. Why does this bill only apply to the farms and not all ag-related businesses?
Despite the many guarantees the Farm Workforce Modernization Act offers, it is not just all the injustices inflicted on our undocumented workforce. Do not settle for mediocre solutions. My name is Ashley Christie, and I'm representing an attorney specializing in labor rights. Adopting this legislation creates more problems than it solves. Key examples include the elimination of approximately 50% of our agricultural workforce and flooding the lower wage labor market. I'm Abby Morgan, speaking on behalf of Representative Michelle Fishbach of Minnesota.
To begin, let's hear from the bill's co-sponsor, Representative Simpson, and opposing views from Representative Fishbach.
The H-2A program is a temporary work visa. It needs to be improved. Workers and employers are not even covered by the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act, MSPA. This bill changes that. According to the Economic Protection Institute, in 2020, over 70% of investigations conducted by the Wage and Hour Division found that employers have violated one or multiple laws harming H-2A workers. Being covered under the MSPA will help change these numbers, as it gives agricultural workers a voice to ensure their rights are protected, by allowing them to sue employers in a federal court to ensure doctrines and conditions. If our goal is to build a strong agricultural workforce, we must first protect the workers that make that possible.
If enacted, this legislation mandates that an agricultural worker's records be reviewed by E-Verify before being permitted to work in the United States agricultural sector. E-Verify cross-references records provided by an individual to their employer with government databases. If these records don't match, this person can't work or reside in America and may be deported. A study done 2018 through 2020 by the USDA shows that approximately half of our agricultural workforce operates without legal documentation. We cannot lose half of what we have. Worldwide food insecurity may follow. Our agricultural workforce is not well documented enough at this time to pass this bill. We need to document the laborers already in the US before this legislation is implemented.
Let's hear from an agricultural producer and a processor.
We all need food to exist. Just over 1% of the U.S. population is directly involved in producing the food that feeds our country and the world. Labor shortages during crucial production and harvest periods have a devastating impact on farming and ranching. As a farmer, I struggle to employ the workforce I need. The current H-2A system fails to meet my growing needs, and Americans are not interested in the jobs I have to offer. Again, by 2050, production will need to increase by 60%, a goal unattainable with today's workforce. Our increases in efficiencies, technological advancements, sustainable farming practices, and development of resilient crops can help ensure global food security, but in order to achieve the 60% goal, we need the long-term labor force that this legislation provides.
With the Farm Workforce Modernization Act requiring better wages and benefits for farm workers, production expenses will increase. If this bill is passed, the likelihood of increasing labor costs for food processing businesses like mine will certainly be a side effect, as the law of supply and demand is manifested throughout the workforce. Costs of goods and services will increase across the board. Beyond that, this legislation does nothing to secure a labor force for food processors or other related ag businesses. It leaves us all like rotting fruit in an unharvested tree.
Now let's hear from our farm worker and labor lawyer.
Undocumented workers feed this country, but at what cost? People like me work up to 16-hour days with tea breaks and face abuse in the workplace. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, this abuse includes things such as false promises, disregard of health-related injuries or illnesses, and threats of deportation. With the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, employers would be required to fill out surety bonds to ensure that workers aren't exploited. By becoming a certified agricultural worker under this legislation, the worker will have more rights, eliminating the fear that often stops workers from speaking against mistreatment. It gives workers a real shot at fairness and dignity as they feed our nation.
The issue that needs to be addressed within this bill is that the government sets strict requirements for permanent residents. We're in a high demand for agricultural workers, yet in Subtitle B, Section 111, this bill only has high standards for eligibility and permanent residence. The true intention of this bill is to only benefit the farmer. It does little to help undocumented workers gain a path to legality. Why only benefit the farmer and not their workers? We're supposed to recognize these migrant workers for their hard work and dedication supporting the country. Instead, we leave them with no real guarantee for legal residence after years of working. This act clearly prioritizes the best interests of farmers.
Are there further worker rights and legal issues with this legislation, Ms. Christie?
As a matter of fact, there are. This bill promises that our workers will be able to speak against injustice. However, it fails to recognize the various language barriers that come with it. How are new workers supposed to report abuse in the workplace when they don't know how? We're leaving these laborers vulnerable and not fully aware of their rights. According to Investigate Midwest, a lack of funding is a major problem across all states in the enforcement of H-2A regulations. Inspectors are underpaid and states are rarely granted the appropriate amount of funding to ensure that workers are treated fairly. The FWMA does not address any sort of funding towards the H-2A program. We struggle with labor ethics, not just labor shortages. When will workers get all the rights they deserve?
Ms. Chiappa, please respond.
The main benefit of this bill for me is that undocumented workers who qualify under the Farm Workforce Modernization Act can earn certified agricultural worker status. This status provides stability, protection from deportation, and the ability to work legally in the U.S., eventually earning legal status. If an individual has worked in agriculture for at least 10 years before enactment, they must work 4 more years on CAW status before they can apply for legal status. If an individual has worked for less than 10 years, they must work 8 more years on CAW status before applying. Once the worker achieves legal status, they can petition for family members to join them in the U.S. The post-pandemic job market in the U.S. is challenging, and this bill will further aggravate the situation. This legislation offers green cards to individuals working in the United States agricultural sector, allowing their entire family to eventually obtain one. Once legalized, these individuals can shift to any industry, causing a surge in the lower wage labor brackets. Americans will face heightened job competition from immigrants who are willing to accept a lower pay. 2019 showed the greatest increase in decades in the lower wage labor brackets. This bill does not address or alleviate these consequences, making a challenging situation much worse.
This bill establishes an employment-based program for the agricultural workforce, demanding substantial past and future work commitments, strengthening American agriculture stability. It mandates biometric security, E-Verify, for current and incoming agricultural workers, allowing existing H-2A visa holders to remain. Applicants are required 180 days of recent agricultural employment to pass a background check, and if qualified, receive a 5-year renewable agricultural work visa. They can then pursue lawful permanent residency through one of 2 pathways, with the $1,000 fine for prior legal presence.
The current H-2A system is difficult for both the producers and program managers to administer. This act changes the application process, paperwork, and processing times, increasing efficiency and allowing producers access to the workforce more quickly. Modifying the program to allow for year-round access to foreign workers will be helpful to farmer and ranchers by increasing production and reducing labor shortages. This need is nowhere more evident than in the dairy industry, where labor is essential 24/7, 365. Further, reaching a better balance between fair compensation for workers and cost considerations for the employers will make participation viable for both. Producers also need greater flexibility in meeting H-2A housing and transportation requirements, which in turn could reduce their costs.
Recent research from Northeastern University's Network Science Institute indicates that 73% of the U.S. food supply is processed by businesses like mine. According to the latest available federal data, in 2021, the U.S. food and beverage manufacturing sector employed 1.7 million people, half of which lack proper documentation. In thousands of these food and beverage processing plants across the country, these employees help to transform raw agriculture materials into stable food products for intermediate use or final consumption. Given these facts, I strongly oppose the legislation that fails to help meet the needs of all agriculture workers.
I want to thank our experts for their thoughtful and recent insights At this time, I will allow each to briefly summarize their positions for you. Those in favor of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, please begin.
Streamlining the H2A program is key in ensuring a stable workforce in the production agriculture sector. Changes can yield positive results for the economy, agriculture productivity, and the livelihoods of both domestic and foreign workers. Please pass the Farm Workforce Modernization Act.
The FWMA emerges as a great solution, offering undocumented workers a pathway to lawful permanent residency. Beyond legal recognition, it provides protection against exploitation and abuse. This bill not only reunites families, but ensures fairness and dignity to those contributing to our nation's prosperity. Support those who feed our country and vote yes.
Although this legislation doesn't solve all agricultural issues, it certainly moves us forward by providing producers a stable workforce, one they can plan for long term, which makes their difficult tasks manageable. The FWMA provides a pathway to legal residency to agricultural workers, whether they're here legally or not. Support these changes, vote yes.
Those in opposition, please summarize your points.
The Farm Workforce Modernization Act potentially only solves a fraction of the entire agriculture industry's labor shortage. Like the farmer, I cannot meet my labor requirements. This bill does nothing for the food processing sector of agriculture. What good does it do to produce food if it never reaches your table?
He said that the Farm Workforce Modernization Act does little to protect undocumented workers from exploitation. It obligates them to work years with no real guarantee of becoming legalized citizens. It certainly favors the farmers and ranchers, certainly, but no assurances are guaranteed to the workers. Therefore, this bill should not be passed.
Labor from other countries is necessary, but passing this bill will not support our long-term needs. If passed, this legislation terminates nearly half of our agricultural workforce, as well as making it more difficult for Americans to re-enter the job market, further hindering our economy. This bill does not solve the larger immigration problem. In fact, it probably makes it worse. Vote no.
Thank you for your attendance and participation in this House Agriculture Committee hearing today. If you have any questions for our two representatives, farmer, processor, immigrant farm worker, or the attorney, please direct your questions to that person. Questions for the general body may be directed to me. Thank you.
Council, any questions?
I'm just curious if you have done this presentation to Congressman Simpson or plan to.
Plan to do this presentation to
Thank you.
Actually scheduled to be in American Falls on the 26th of March, but he's having a hip replaced.
Uh-oh.
So we're rescheduling.
Tell him to roll him over to American Falls then.
Yeah.
Any other questions, council?
It's not a question, just a comment. I work in the ag industry and the labor abuses are really bad. So thank you for doing this.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you
Wonderful.
coming over and doing that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, Mark, thank you for your time spent, and you're doing a great job with these
Thank you.
future leaders.
It's easy. These are all sophomores, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Great,
They've done all their own research and everything, so pretty awesome kids.
super, thank you.
Great
Travel
job.
safe.
Good job.
Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 3 is the Animal Shelter Advisory Board update. Representatives from the Animal Shelter Advisory Board will be in attendance to discuss the board's goals and projects, as well as council's policies and expectations.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Good morning.
I don't think we can beat that last one.
I don't think you can either.
All right, good morning. We're here to discuss some changes and some updates on the advisory board. I'm going to hand it over to Arlen Walker, our president. He's going to kind of go through some things some issues we're dealing with and some updates and some changes we like to do.
Yeah. Okay, we found over the last year that, well, we get a lot of calls from the public sometimes, mostly complaints, but we found that the meetings very often turned into just a list of complaints from whatever, few of which we could do anything about. And so we want to institute some changes to make the advisory board more efficient and more up-to-date for what's going on. And we have, I think you have in front of you some suggestions we'd like to have made to the resolution that created this body in the first place. If you'll notice in item 2, the board will consist of 7 to 9 members. And originally, there was pretty much only one animal welfare organization primarily in existence. There were some splinter ones and some small ones. So the resolution, I think, I'm just guessing, was probably made so that there would be a representative or representatives from a group that was in the business of advocating for animal welfare and whatnot. At that time, the Bannock Humane Society was about the only show in town, and so the board was constituted with at least 2 members from that body. Over time, we have found that there are now other groups going on doing things. There's Port Animal Welfare Society, Aid to Adoption Rescue, Bannock Feral Friends, All About the Animals Coalition, and others. And so to even out the representation, we would like to see item 2 amended. You'll notice the highlighted part which says, at least 2 of whom shall be members of the Bannock Humane Society. We would like to see that amended so that there can be no more than 1 member from any established animal welfare group to even out the views and the representation there. Now, if the question arises that perhaps that would overload the board with animal specialists, I would say that since the board is appointed by the mayor, and I think there's a question on the application, are you with any animal group? That could be, I think eventually if they all came from animal groups, that would eliminate the general public, and that is not the point. So if no more than 1 from any animal group, that would keep from having a block vote of any kind. So that's one request we're making. On page 2, since the shift of the animal shelter services have been kind of divided among animal control as far as the control issues and the shelter itself as far as housing issues, we would like to see that item 3 changed where regarding the control of animals in the city, for which we really have no point in doing at this time because it's now under code enforcement. We would like to see that changed to sheltering of the animals so we could focus our attentions only on issues that affect the animal shelter itself with regard to the care and housing of the animals that come in. And the next one would be, you'll see it's highlighted, just remove animal control services and change it to animal shelter issues so we could focus our efforts on helping with events and problems and situations there that might come to us through the general public. Because right now, with the exception of the Animal Shelter Board and the staff at the shelter, there is really no input for, or no avenue for input from the general public in those kinds of issues. And so that is our request. Do you have any questions?
Council, any questions you might have? Councilmember Mangum?
So I was looking at this portion where, just listening to you talk and looking at this portion about switching from the control aspect to the sheltering and then animal control services to animal sheltering issues. And a lot of that is now being more tasked by code enforcement.
Right.
So my question is, how is the partnership in working with code enforcement? Is that working pretty well with the animal shelter as they're out doing their job and then bring the animals to you, or how does that look?
We work together. We have to. I mean, they're bringing us animals and they're dealing with the public, and we deal with the same public when they come and pick up the animals. There's been some tough times, some adjustments we had to make in the last year or so. And we're continuing to strive to make it easier for the ordinance enforcement officers, us, and the public. The transition has been rocky, I'm not gonna lie, but we're working towards getting better.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Brent?
So you've asked to remove any references to control and limit that to shelter activities, but do you wish to have or give input on control, or do you want to be just simply now limited to the shelter?
Well, what we've found is occasionally we get complaints from the public. A common one is on the border between the two cities, Chubbuck and Pocatello. If a dog crosses the street and he's on the Pocatello side, then that's an animal shelter issue or a control issue. Someone calls in a stray dog. In the meantime, it crosses the street, and that becomes a Chubbuck issue. And someone calls and complains and says, I live right on the border, and animal control won't pick it up because I'm not in the Pocatello city limits. That is not the kind of an issue that we now would have any input in or recommending a change for. So we recommend them to call code enforcement and ask their questions there. So, there's.
I have something to add to that. A lot of times the advisory board in the past year or so, a lot of their issues and concerns are with ordinance enforcement, which is not under the shelter anymore. So I can't really answer to why. I mean, I can always ask, and I do, but I can't make a decision on behalf of the ordinance enforcement. It's just not the shelter's responsibility anymore. So I can't make that decision for them. And this is we're kind of just defining it now to just shelter and sheltering.
I understand, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think this is a good change because I think there is a lot of confusion about, what the shelter does and then the issue of animal control.
And since this change, there has been
Yeah.
confusion. We're trying to clarify that. Some people understand, some don't. And even our advisory board doesn't really understand. I think changing this
We'll clarify.
will clarify. Yes.
And I read a lot of comments on social media, you're talking about the complaints, and I read a lot of those, and I think there's confusion in the public about what is a control issue and who does that, and what does the animal services and animal shelter, what do you do? And most people refer to you as animal control.
Right.
And so I see that term all the time, and I'm like, but we don't call it that. So I'm confused when I read those comments. So my question is, I think this is a good change, and I think it's good to clarify who does what and what what issue is what and who would handle it. But are we going to, excuse me, we're making this change in the resolution possibly as far as what the board does, but are we going to educate the public to this change in any way? Are we going to try to clarify? Because I think there is confusion just out there in the.
Been educating the public since this change on who does, the police department does the ordinance enforcement. We house the animals and shelter them here. And we've been explaining that division through the past year and a half. I think a lot of people are starting to understand it, but just changing this resolution would actually enforce that a little bit more.
And allow the board to kind of know what their
Yes.
their role is.
What their role is. And I think that a lot of that too is they come in with the enforcement or issues. And we would like it just to be strictly for the shelter, because that's what it is. It's the shelter advisory board.
I just think anything that we can do to help people understand sort of what the divisions are, whose roles are what, would be helpful.
We have done some stuff on Facebook and stuff like that, but that's hit or miss.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, yes.
With the change here on page 1, can you explain to me the breakdown of the current voting membership that you have now? Looking at, we want to remove it to one member of an animal welfare organization. What does it currently look like?
Well, right now, we have 3 vacancies. And that is kind of an issue because some of the people who have chosen not to re-up or apply have said, well, what good are we doing? Are we doing any good at all? That's one issue. Another issue was that it would seem to be unfair that one animal group over another would have precedence and they could actually maybe form a voting block or whatever. Not that we have any issues that are controversial much anymore, but right now I think there are 3 vacancies. I contacted 2 of the people who were up for, it's like a 2-year term, and they're up on various dates based on 2 years from when they were first appointed. And right now, I think there are 3 openings and no applicants. So we're down to 7 or 6 at this point. And I hope those vacancies are filled by the time we get back. And we thought that by doing this, first, it prevents a voting block. It gives equal representation to everybody and leaves it open for the general public, regardless of their animal association affiliation, from taking part in assisting the shelter in its current goals.
So when we're saying, so there's multiple animal welfare organizations out there. And so are we looking at one person representing each one of those organizations or just one individual who serves?
Our goal is not to require that there be one from each, but right now as it is, there have to be 2 from the Bannock Humane Society. And technically, 3 others, without designating their affiliation, could probably apply and maybe be appointed without that knowledge. But I'm pretty sure on the application, there is a question regarding, what are your affiliations with regard to animal welfare? I haven't read the application for a couple of years, so that part I don't know. But we'd like to see a general representation from the public, general public. And it does help to have some expertise on there from people who are dealing with animal issues all the time.
That was kind of the thing that I was getting at, is having that representation from essentially experts.
Right.
General public.
Veterinarians, vet techs, that kind of thing. I mean, even dog groomers, dog trainers, anything that's in the animal industry, we would welcome.
Absolutely. Having input from general public, they see what animals are, what they see with
And
the
the general
animals.
public.
And this is their community. So having their representation and their voice heard is very important. But I think having experts also is really important too, to understand how to implement different changes or,
I think
how to
having
move forward.
that balance would be viable for
Absolutely.
that advisory board and for
Absolutely.
the shelter.
For sure. Thank you so much.
As long as I've been on by chance, we've always had at least one person from a vet clinic agency, a vet tech on there. And it is advantageous to have that.
So I have one more follow-up question. So we have the 3 vacancies. So outside of these being posted on the city website, what is the animal shelter and the advisory board, what do you guys do to try to get more people interested or get people aware that these vacancies are there? Are we reaching out to the veterinary clinics? Are we reaching out to different community members or the chamber or any organizations to say, hey, there's these vacancies, we need some of these seats filled?
Honestly, we have not reached out.
Nothing official, just word of mouth. You run into a friend, hey, why don't you join the board? That sort of thing.
For sure.
But that is a great point.
It is. Excellent.
We put it out, we have news releases and puts it out on a regular basis when we have vacancies, and so it's going out to the public.
Yeah.
She puts it out regularly, anytime we have vacancies, and so.
We realize this has to go through legal and all of that based on the decision you folks make, so.
The shelter would like to see an advisory board that can work with us and we can get some ideas going. I can't think of all this myself. I need help, and that's what the advisory board's there for.
Okay, all right. Brent?
I'd like to follow up on a question Corey had. I guess I didn't understand the answer. On page 1 here, it says you want to limit it to no more than one person from any animal welfare organization. Do you mean one person
One representative.
One representative
representative.
that is a member, not one per individual
Yeah,
organization,
we
just one.
One representative.
The rest
from-
would be sort of at large, right?
Like if two people from, say, Bannock Farrell Friends applied, only one of those two could be selected to be on the board.
Right, but what if you had one from 3 different organizations?
That's possible.
Is that, are you trying to preclude that or allow that?
We're trying to allow, oh, that could happen, but that's up to the mayor's discretion in picking in the applicant.
I think, Councilmember, I think what they're doing is trying to prevent one group. For example, we've got here it's called out Bannock Humane Society, and they're trying to prevent Bannock Humane Society from getting a voting block. You can have one from different organizations. They just don't want a block that will push that one group ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I understand, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you guys have any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move to agenda item number 4 is Child Care Advisory Committee update. Representatives from the Child Care Advisory Committee will be in attendance to discuss the committee's goals and projects, as well as council's policies and expectations.
Good morning. I'm Mallory Bascom. I'm the Licensing Enforcement Officer with the Pocatello Police Department and the Staff Liaison for the Child Care Advisory Committee. The purpose of the committee is to make recommendations regarding potential revisions to the City of Pocatello Child Care Code, review available training classes offered in the area, and recommend courses that can be used to satisfy staff training requirements set forth in our code. The monthly child care meetings provide the members with vital information and updates pertaining to daycares. We provide available resources for daycare owners and employees to help improve the quality and safety of child care facilities, thus ensuring a safer and healthier environment for the children in our community. The committee is instrumental in supporting my position as enforcement officer as it promotes a collaborative effort between a variety of agencies, disciplines, and perspectives, all of which have a common goal in mind, which is to provide improve quality child care in Pocatello. In 2023, the Pocatello Police Department hosted an active shooter prevention training. We had over 55 people enroll for and attend the training, and it was a huge success. We worked to keep daycares in the loop about beneficial events such as Give Kids a Smile, the Buckle Up event, and an upcoming Understanding Lead training, and we plan to coordinate additional trainings in the coming months. Voting and non-voting members of the committee consists of parents, child care providers, a registered environmental health specialist with the Southeastern Idaho Public Health who conducts inspections and ensures facilities within Pocatello are abiding by the regulations set forth in our code, a child care consultant with Idaho Stars who goes to the facilities and conducts on-site visits to improve the overall care in the facilities, a clinical instructor from the Early Childhood Care and Education Program at ISU, and an inspector from the Pocatello Fire Department who provides vital information regarding inspections and regulations for daycares and preschools. The members of the committee have assisted the City of Pocatello in being proactive with necessary and beneficial changes to the Child Care Code and continue to work to make suggestions in that regard. At this time, there are 30 licensed daycares operating in Pocatello, capable of providing care for roughly 2,080 children. 6 of those are in-home centers, and up until recently, we had one more in-home provider who was in the process of becoming licensed. But unfortunately, due to the rising costs of required insurance coverage, she was unable to move forward with that. In 2023, we saw 2 in-home centers close their doors in Pocatello, one facility that was closed by the Pocatello Police Department, and one facility that moved out of the area. Additionally, I issued licenses for 588 employees, volunteers, or visitors, while only approximately 291, or 51% of those, are still in the workforce in Pocatello, highlighting a major issue with turnover that the daycares are experiencing, largely due to their inability to pay higher wages. Daycares have recently met an additional struggle with the loss of the food program, which Carrie Giesbrick will touch on further in a moment, causing many of them to again increase their rates. In the weeks following the loss of the food program, I saw an uptick in reports involving unlicensed in-home daycares. As a result of those reports, I reached out to approximately 8 individuals regarding those concerns and the licensing requirements they would face. The committee would like to thank the members of our City Council for your continued support in making decisions that uphold child care regulations set forth by Pocatello's Child Care Code. Your decisions ultimately affect the safety and well-being of the children in our community, and we thank you for your time.
Roger. Good morning, members of City Council. I'm Mayor Blad. My name is Carrie Giesbrecht. I am the president of the Child Care Advisory Board and owner of Carrie's Corner Child Care here in Pocatello, and I have one in Preston. Thank you for your continued support in our efforts to create opportunities for our child care centers to provide the highest quality of safety and care to our little people in Pocatello. For those of you who are new to the council, the purpose of the Child Care Advisory Committee is to discuss health and safety guidelines for all providers and centers, to uphold codes and modify when needed, to discuss and provide training for providers in Pocatello, and to ensure the needs of the providers and our families in our area are being met to the best of our abilities. Also, we provide a newsletter to providers with helpful hints and important information. This past year has been a hard one on us as child care providers. In June, we were prematurely dropped for the child care grant that was granted to us for the effects of COVID. And then just last month, we took another hit by losing the Nutrition Works food program, which provided reimbursement for nutritional meals provided to children in our centers. This has truly opened our eyes to our value by the state of Idaho. By no means is it an easy profession and is done with pure love for the little people and their families. With these hits, we have had to increase our tuition to heart-wrenching prices to compensate the continually growing inflation and decrease of enrollment and fear of many more, the loss of any above and beyond assistance from the state. This has caused a significant decrease of enrollment and fear of many more underground child care centers popping up in the near future. This possesses a huge problem because these are not able to be monitored, which can pose risks for children. We are concerned with this fact. I've been in contact with majority of the child care owners in Pocatello, and the general consensus is that we're undervalued, underappreciated, and it kind of takes the pep out of one's step. I don't have any answers to our continued problems, but we just want you to know our feelings and our concerns. We're just hoping that you keep our concerns in the forefront of your mind. In light of these challenges, we recognize the importance of maintaining open communication with the City Council, and we believe your guidance and support are pivotal in overcoming these obstacles. The well-being of the development of children under our care remain our top priority, and we're committed to navigating these difficulties to ensure they continue to receive the high quality of child care they deserve. We understand the complexity and challenges faced by the City Council, and we sincerely appreciate your dedication to the betterment of our community. We believe that working collaboratively with the City Council, we can try and address these issues and find solutions to the current difficulties faced by the child care providers in Pocatello. I did pass out a center license for 49 children. This is just kind of to try to give you some numbers, right? So let's say there's a child care center that has 49 children in there. The rates that are listed there are our market rates for Idaho. That is what they have assessed and decided, hey, this is what we'll pay for these certain ages of children each month. So if you have a fully occupied center, it gives you the total income, which is really rare, by the way. You don't ever get, you have space for 49, you're never gonna get 49. It's very rare, but if you were, it would be $25,482 according to the state's appropriation of the funds for each child. So then if you kind of consider all your wages, that'll be about $12,902. That's what we pay in wages for our income, and that is only paying our staff between $10 and $11 an hour, which is ridiculous. You cannot survive, and we know that. We can't survive off of that. So that's between about, that's 51% of our total income. For a small business to survive, the payroll should fall between 15 and 30%. And we're not like a normal small business. We can't take like a gallon of milk, it used to be 99 cents, and raise it to $5. These are kiddos, and we have to raise our rates, which then in turn affects our parents, and they look at us like we're nuts, because why are you charging this much? So then we take this hit with the food program. The food program, it kind of lists what they were reimbursing us for each child for each meal. And if you calculate that out, it ends up being $4,596.20. that now just added to our costs monthly to ensure that our kids get a nutritious meal. Our options, we can make the parents bring their meals, but we already have our tuition so high that it's ridiculous. And so try and tell parents, oh, by the way, now you gotta bring food. It's sad. So we're just facing a significant crisis. I don't have any answers. I don't have any asks. Well, I guess I do. Just keep us in your mind when you're voting, when you're talking to state officials, like anything, because we're gonna need it.
Good morning, City Council and Mayor Glad. My name is Laura Thomas, and I am a member of the Child Care Advisory Committee, and I also am an assistant director with Idaho Stars. I did give you some handouts. This one here is our statewide report, so it's not specifically Pocatello, but some things I did want to point out. As you look through this, I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but child care providers are decreasing in the state. Part of that is due to the pay. The average pay across the state is the median wage is $13.50 an hour. As you can see also on page 7, one of the things to note that elementary school teachers with a bachelor's degree compared to childcare providers with a bachelor's degree make almost twice as much for caring for children who are maybe 1 year older. So it's a significant difference. You can take some time to look at this. That's the statewide report. This one here, the one pager, is the Region 6, which includes Pocatello. Compared to the statewide median wage, in Region 6, our median wage for a child care provider is $11 an hour, like Carrie was talking about. And you can just look some at this. We had what I saw in Region 6 was a 37% turnover rate, which really affects childcare providers in constantly hiring and training new staff. It's a huge economic hit. And then when you raise your rates, it has a direct impact on families. Also, we're struggling to keep childcare providers, which means we're struggling to keep spots for parents, and that really affects the workforce, both parents' ability to work and the industries that they're working in, losing their workers. So one of the things that the Child Care Committee does is we promote trainings, we promote other opportunities that are out there, such as academic scholarships, certificates such as Child Development Associate certificates with trainings. We also promote our Steps to Quality program, which really helps child care increase quality in their programs. When your teachers are more educated, they're going to be and trained, they're going to be less stressed out during the day. They're going to know how to deal with behavioral issues in the classroom more healthily, and that is going to help with the retention rate. Our ask basically is that we appreciate Pocatello and the City Council's support of early childhood education, and we ask for your continued support. Just on basic childcare issues and your support of families with young children.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nichols.
So is there anything specifically that the city of Pocatello can do to help make childcare better in Pocatello?
Kind of. And my thoughts are, we've been talking a lot about trying to get the employers of bigger companies or even any kind of employers to encourage or offer a tax break or offer something to provide some childcare finances for their employees. Because where we're having to raise our rates, their employees are also taking a hit, which then they are like, some are leaving the workforce. But if they offer, and we can encourage employers to offer some kind of incentive, childcare incentive, that would benefit everybody in the long haul.
I've heard a few times that some of the owners have said they've been approached by certain businesses saying, if you'll give us a discount, we'll send all of our employees to you. The problem is they can't afford to give a discount, even if that means they're gonna get 5 more children enrolled, because they have to cover all the costs of food, and they have training requirements that they have to meet, and they're already paying their employees such a nominal amount. And so I think seeing support from the community, from employers who are willing to kick in a portion of a daycare cost would be huge, and really working toward just seeing change at a city level, and then of course a state level is going to be the best we can do. Having our community see the crisis that daycare really is in, and putting an effort toward fixing that collaboratively.
Council
Thank you.
President Lyric, and then Councilmember Mangum, and then Councilmember Paulson.
I was just sitting here remembering this presentation last year, and I remember, Carrie, you in particular were in tears, really. That was right about the time when the funding from the state went away, and we knew that you were headed into a really rough period, because things were already difficult before that. But then that was going to make it that much more difficult. And now you've said that you've had a really challenging year. I'm just kind of curious, what kind of things did you do to get through this past year?
I've increased my tuition twice.
You have?
I've had to. Everybody has had to. And like I said, it's astronomical prices for like, I don't know, for just a mom and dad that has one kiddo, you know. I have to charge $850 a month for an infant, which is, how much does, you know, let's say they take home $1,500 a month.
Right.
You know, I'm taking half of their wage to watch their kiddo, but I have to be able to employ.
Survive.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. I was curious, I've talked to a lot of legislators about this issue. Well, I would say most legislators I talk to at our state level are saying the 2 top issues in our state, and I think this is in other places in the country too, but housing and childcare are the 2 issues, and affordable housing and affordable childcare, that it's, and especially childcare is almost a crisis situation. So I think there are legislators that are aware of it, and I do agree that the more any of us can reach out to them and see what they can do. One solution that I've heard is, and you mentioned talking to employers and asking them to give some kind of incentive or financial assistance to their employees. Another solution that I've heard is asking employers to think about providing daycare in-house. Like if they're a large employer, could they have an, you know, on-site daycare for their employees? And I'm wondering, like, what kind of effect does that have on you? Does that help your situation, or?
If they had in-house?
Yeah.
You know, I guess it could go 50-50, right? So it could take potential work away, but there's also enough children in Pocatello. You know, it's not, I think, how many centers were there?
30 currently in Pocatello.
I swear, like 5 years ago, there were 60, like literally. I think we're down, we keep depleting. And I don't know, if I didn't have such a passion for children and for the city and for my families, I would go find another job. It'd be more beneficial. I talked to one owner this last advisory board. She hasn't taken a paycheck since January.
December, I think she said.
Oh,
actually.
December. Like, and that's all of us.
And I think it's important to recognize the fact that we already have daycare centers. We have an infrastructure for that already. And so, sure, you can recommend opening one in-house, but there's going to be a lot of requirements that have to be looked at with that. Is it a safe place? Are there chemicals at the facility? You know, what do they do with that business? But there's already compassionate, caring, loving childcare providers in our community. that are ready to take care of your kids and give them the love and education that they need. They just need the support so that they can be successful.
Can I follow up?
Okay.
That's why I'm asking about this, because I appreciate that people are trying to come up with solutions. We need that. But I also want to be careful that the solutions we come up with are not causing other problems, and how helpful are they actually going to be. So I think we need to keep working on what would really help the situation. And if something might help a few people, but then it takes away from, the existing shelters. I mean, daycare centers, sorry, I was thinking animals. But if it's taking away from the system we already have, then that's not,
There's definitely
in the end, that
potential for
helpful.
that.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think about what kinds of things might be the most helpful. Yeah, thank you.
So Mangum and then Paulson.
I don't really have any questions. I just want to commend you for what you're doing. Kids are the future, and they warrant and need to be cared for efficiently and adequately. It really breaks my heart to hear this is the conditions that we're in currently. Having 7 kids, every one of them has seen daycare, and it is not cheap. It's not easy, and it's really hard to send your kids to strangers. You know what I mean? And when there's people who care for the kids, and they, like what you were saying, Carrie, is like, if I didn't have a passion for the families, like I wouldn't do what I do. And so I commend you for what you're doing, all 3 of you. Oversight, and then the advisory committee, and just everything that you guys are doing. I commend you for that. And so thank you. My one question, though, is what constitutes an unlicensed daycare facility? Like, is there a certain number of kids in the home, or?
So in Pocatello, the state, I think, allows you to do 6. But in Pocatello, we say that if you are receiving compensation for providing childcare in your home or caring for children for more than 15 hours a week, then that is childcare. You're providing childcare. And so with that, there's requirements that you guys have heard about throughout the year, CPR and first aid training, different training hours that they're expected to meet, a background check. Those are just kind of the basics, but.
Now, typically, when we see these, what we would call unlicensed daycare facilities, is it typically like family, friends, cousins, relatives, or is it just somebody who's legitimately just trying to open up shop?
So you can, the city code allows you to provide care to the second degree of relationship. So if I was caring for my nieces and nephews, for example, that would be okay. These are more friends of the family, or I heard about this person online, people that maybe they are not super familiar with, or someone that they met through word of mouth, and they're not an actual relative or a grandparent that's providing care.
They're basically people on Facebook saying, childcare is way too expensive. I need somebody to watch my baby who's available.
Okay.
Hayden.
Yeah, I just want to say I really enjoy meeting with you, with the advisory committee, and sincerely appreciate what you guys do.
We thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Do we know how many children that are not in childcare that's in Pocatello? You named 2,080 children, but I can
That's what our
guarantee there's more than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the numbers are on that.
And
but-
I personally know someone right now that's looking for they're working, they're having a baby, they're looking for an infant spot, and they are really struggling. So there is need for more childcare. And it may cause a gap in her employment if she can't find someone to watch her infant.
Okay, and then the food program, that's the state money that they voted to not take from the federal government a couple years ago.
No, just this last month, we lost the food program. So the last year was it was a childcare grant. It was just extra money to help during the pandemic and after. This is actually, this has been around since I've been around, 2006, I think. Been the food program, and they have been reimbursing every meal, breakfast, lunch, and a snack. So we'll go and buy them meals. They are monitoring us, they're making sure we're doing the correct portions, the right amounts, the right kinds. So it's, a very highly monitored program, and they just barely dropped us this month.
It's a federal program, and you have to have a sponsor to participate. And the sponsor that was covering most of the state quit being a sponsor. So now childcare providers, if they want to participate, they either have to independently find their own sponsor, they have to become their own sponsor, and it is a complicated, lengthy process. I think that there, are some people trying to maybe become a sponsor, but right now there's that void. There isn't a sponsor for it.
Can you be a sponsor for a specific region or the specific city or
Yourself.
yourself?
Yeah, you can do all of that.
We have one provider that's going through the process now to try to go become a sponsor for herself. And she says it's pretty easy so far. It gets to the very end, and there's like an 80-page budget that has to be provided by us. We're childcare providers, like we're not CPAs. We don't. But she's to that point where she's like, I don't know if I'm gonna finish. I don't know if I'm gonna go through this. And she lost $9,000 a month through the food program.
So the United Way, I know, is doing some work with this. Mrs. Call is working with them as well. I don't remember her first name for some reason, but Danielle, thank
right
you.
there.
There you are. There you are. Anyway, I know that she's been working. Have you met with her, and have you met with
Most
them?
recent meeting, she was very, very helpful, super educated, great to listen to her talk about it.
Yeah, she's got a lot of really good ideas, and I think there's some solutions to that. Maybe if you work with like the United Way, they might do something that can help with that. I know that they've met with me, and we've talked about some different ideas, but it's a tough topic to figure out. So thank you for your work and what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we will move to agenda item 5 is a CDBG Advisory Committee update. Representatives from the Community Development Block Grant CDBG Advisory Committee will be in attendance to discuss the committee's goals and projects, as well as council's policies and expectations. Danelle, I'm just proud that I remembered your last name. Thank you.
Have to try the USB 3 times. Good morning, Mayor Blad, members of the City Council. My name is Christine Howe, and I'm the Grants Manager for the City of Pocatello.
Heather Disselkoon, I'm the chair of CDBG.
All right. And we're here today to present about the CDBG Advisory Committee. We provide this presentation annually to City Council to provide updates on what we've been working on and the purpose of the Advisory Committee. So the CDBG Advisory Committee is composed of 7 members, 4 of whom must live in what we call our designated target neighborhoods. These are reflective of our neighborhood associations that exist in Pocatello. So the map here kind of demonstrates where those 6 neighborhoods are. We have Alameda, Bonneville, College, Mountain View, formerly known as Whittier, Lewis and Clark, and then the neighborhoods of Old Town, which they've kind of subdivided amongst their association. The advisory committee makes recommendations to City Council on the adoption of our required consolidated plan and annual CDBG project funding. The City of Pocatello became a community development block grant entitlement community in 1997, and as part of the Housing and Urban Development Agency's requirements, we have to adopt action plans and 5-year plans to be able to spend that federal funding. And so our advisory committee does a lot of work to help make those recommendations to City Council, which are then submitted to HUD for approval. Right now we have 4 members on our advisory committee, 2 of whom represent our neighborhoods and 2 of whom are at-large members. So as noted, some of their responsibilities include creating that annual action plan, our 5-year consolidated plan, overviewing and reviewing the program as we progress through our program year to make sure we're spending the funds on the eligible activities in accordance with the greatest needs for the community, and then also assisting with the Fair Housing Act requirements for education for the community. For Fair Housing Act, we typically host a social media campaign in the month of April, which is Fair Housing Month, as well as offer training to our local Realtor Association. And then we co-host a training with Idaho Falls, and we alternate hosting that every other year to provide Fair Housing Act education to landlords, community members, any other housing providers. So we have that training coming up in April next month. So we're pretty excited to host that again in conjunction with Idaho Falls. As noted, the CDBG program is guided by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. HUD allows us to spend our CDBG funding on 5 eligible project areas. Primarily, we focus on housing. We also can address public infrastructure needs such as sidewalks, public facilities, which are upgrades to buildings that serve the members of the public. Public services, those are typically provided by our nonprofit partners for our low and moderate income residents. And then also we are able to fund administration of the grant and planning. Our current consolidated plan covers program years 2022 through 2026. The program year begins April 1 of the year and it concludes March 31. So our last year on this current con plan will be March 31 of 2027. So we'll have to begin con plan planning soon in my mind, which is the summer of 2026. It's right around the corner. But just to give you a sense of when our next 5-year plan will be ready for renewal.
You're just taking away 2 years.
I know, we operate in the
that.
future back in the planning department, so, but it's a process that requires a lot of public engagement, so we want to ensure that we get ahead of that and get the sufficient engagement, particularly reaching out to those hard-to-reach populations and our low to moderate income populations who are the primary beneficiaries of the funds. Each program year we do complete an action plan, and this is largely guided by the consolidated plan. So the 5-year plan will show us kind of generally where we want our funding allocated, where the greatest needs are, and then the action plan is how we do that strategically each year. HUD requires us to submit this 45 days prior to the start of the program year. And so you may recall that we came before you in December to present our action plan for approval and submission to HUD. But that might have been January. And that's really where our advisory committee has done all the groundwork to help put that action plan together and get that submitted in accordance with the regulations. So this little timeline here shows you that we have the process we go through to put together that action plan. It includes a technical assistance meeting for anyone interested in applying for CDBG funding. Then we hold our needs hearing to find out what those needs are in that year to make sure our con plan still aligns with that. We have our interested applicants submit their applications. The advisory committee goes through an extensive review and often includes an interview and presentation as part of that. They'll put together their recommendation that we'll have a public hearing on. City Council will approve and then we'll submit to HUD. So this is where we are right now. We have not yet submitted our plan to HUD, even though we're past that February 15th date, because we have not received our federal appropriation. So the feds have not released the funding amount, so I cannot submit the plan without a number to put in for the amount that we'll spend.
Why don't you just pick the number you want?
I wish we could.
Submit it.
Yeah.
Any idea when they're going to?
I think federal budgets were approved, so hopefully in the next several weeks. This happens almost every year, and then what HUD does is they issue a memo saying, if your action plan due date was past this notice, you have 45 days to submit it. So once we get that number, we'll be able to make any changes to the plan as needed and submit. We just kind of wait on HUD for that. Typically, the entitlement has either been level funded or reduced since I have been here. I believe in our next slide, you can see here our program year 23, we had a reduction of 8.4% from the previous year. I believe the budget was level funded again by the federal government, so I'm anticipating another decrease this year. We did try to anticipate that in our plan. We budgeted a little less than our entitlement from last year in order to ensure that we accounted for that potential reduction. If we receive additional funding, we'll proportionally increase what we submitted here and did vote on a plan to increase for our nonprofits. So you can see the items that we identified last year for programs. And so, as the budget comes out, we can make changes if needed. But to give you a summary of program year 23, we received just over $390,000 in entitlement funding, and these are the programs we were able to fund, and I'll kind of just touch on each of those. And so for housing, we provided just under $169,000 for these programs. It included our Let's Safe and Healthy Homes program match. Habitat for Humanity offers an in-kind repair program to do accessibility improvements on homes. NeighborWorks Pocatello, we continue to fund their mobile home rehab grants and loan program. And then we also fund our internal renewal grant and loan program, where we provide low and moderate income residents with grants up to $5,000 for eligible repairs and loans for anything in addition to that. And the loans are 0% interest and partially deferred depending on the person's LMI status. Here's an example of one of our lead houses that we were able to help fund. You can see the before, the during. This home included, we conducted the project in the winter because the child had elevated blood lead levels. So it rose to kind of an emergency status where we wanted to remediate that lead as soon as possible. And then here's the after photo. In addition to the housing projects, we provide public service funding, and this is kind of a newer way to spend the CDBG funds. We've been doing this for the last probably 5 years or so, where we allocate the allowable portion of funds to local nonprofits to support services for low to moderate income residents. So you can see the list there of nonprofits we were able to support in their programs. And these are really vital services that really bridge a gap for a lot of folks. We get calls all the time from residents looking for rental assistance, utility bill assistance, things like that. And a lot of these programs allow us to provide that small financial assistance or supportive case services to help our low and moderate income residents. In addition to services, we also fund public facilities and public infrastructure. Many of you are probably aware of our sidewalk program. We offer grants to individuals who qualify for sidewalk improvements. They do have to be in a low to moderate income area as designated by HUD and meet our income eligibility requirements. But that's been a beneficial program for folks who have especially accessibility, need mobility assistance and things like that. And we also entered into a 5-year agreement to fund the new Aid for Friends shelter acquisition. So this program year represented year 4 of those 5 years. So we'll continue to fund that in program year 2024, and that will be the last year to contribute toward that shelter. Here's just a few photos of some of our recent individual sidewalk projects that we completed. Andrew's nice enough to go out in the winter and get that after photo for us.
I was going to say, was that in the wintertime or was that last week?
Yeah, so some of these projects we do start in the fall. We try to keep them moving, and then the contractors might have to put it on pause and come back to complete, depending, or they'll finish right before a storm, and then we go out and get the after photos later. But our seasons do kind of prohibit and dictate a lot of some of our construction work, so we're happy to be able to do these in the spring, summer, and fall. Here's another one that we completed. So, and then we're going to be kicking off our neighborhood-wide sidewalk project. If that bid is approved at council meeting next week, and we'll be able to do the Bonneville neighborhood sidewalk project that we were able to couple with federal transit funding for. As a result of COVID, they did issue additional CDBG funding to the cities. It was called the CARES Act funds. And so we have been spending that down pretty regularly through our program years since that was appropriated. And we managed to complete one final facility project through that funding for the free clinic. It allowed for us to put in an entryway window for clients to check in, a security door, and then a sliding window in the pharmacy for contactless prescription filling. And this will allow them to prepare for and prevent COVID by allowing that social distancing and really help with their operation there. So this effectively spent down the remainder of our CARES Act funds that we were awarded through CDBG, and so we'll be able to close that program out. Here are some photos showing the areas of the free clinic where we conducted the work. So you can see this photo on the left is their front entry, so it's right when you walk in, there was a small door to come into the offices in the waiting room area, but now we've created this front entry window so folks aren't queuing up in the hallway and crowding around that entryway area. So if we have to impose social distancing again, they'll be able to do this more effectively in the front entryway. In addition, they, to get in their pharmacy and fill prescriptions and come back around to the clinic rooms, there was a wall here between the two rooms on the left and right. And so we were able to install this sliding window so that they can fill the prescriptions and then bring them back to the clients, which will allow, again, for reduced contact. Otherwise, they would have had to walk all the way through the waiting room where all the other clients are waiting and walk around the building to be able to get from the pharmacy to the rooms. So this allows for reduced exposure, which will help make things more efficient and a little safer if there's COVID protocols implemented. And lastly, we were able to install this security door. You can see the front entrance to the clinic on the right-hand photo there. And essentially, folks could walk into the free clinic and then wander into the back to where the client rooms were. And so we're able to install this security door, which is accessible by a keypad, so that when clients are ready to be brought back to the rooms, staff can do that. And it makes it more secure, but also prevents anyone from kind of entering spaces that they're not supposed to. So we were happy that the COVID funds were able to provide these upgrades to make this facility a little safer in the event of a COVID emergency. So as I mentioned, we don't have the program year 24 funding yet, but looking forward, this is what we've included in our action plan as our spending plan. Guided by our consolidated plan, the majority of the funding goes toward housing. We are still anticipating public infrastructure improvements through the sidewalk program, the public facility improvements, which is that 5th year of the Aid for Friends shelter acquisition, and then our services program and our admin and planning. So that's where our program year 24 budget is. And if you have any questions, Heather and I are happy to answer them.
Councilmember Nichols?
So regarding the lead remediation program, how was the demand for that program? It would seem important to get that lead removed from houses, and then assuming that there is a high demand on it, do you have enough money to cover the demand?
Yeah, we'd certainly have enough money to cover the demand. The biggest issue we're finding right now with that program is that folks are unable to qualify either because of their income, they make too much money or right outside of that income limit, or they don't meet the other requirement, which is to have a child under the age of 6. So we have a kind of a wait list of projects for folks who don't meet the priority requirements under HUD. But are definitely encouraging folks to try to apply. We have plenty of funding. It's all grant funded. We can remediate that lead paint. They just have to meet our income threshold and have that child under 6. So we've been doing quite a bit of marketing to push out the program, and we'd love to get more applicants in if possible. So we know that Pocatello's housing stock, over 60% is built, it likely has lead-based paint, particularly in those core neighborhoods. So if you know anyone that might qualify or can promote the program, we would greatly appreciate that.
So for the benefit of people listening here, is that paid for 100%?
Yes, it's 100% paid for by the grant that we received from HUD.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Mangum, and then Council President Lurick.
Christine, you had mentioned reduction in allotment. What percent of that is reduced every year that you're noticing?
So the last 2 years, we went down 8.4%, and then the year prior to that went down about 7.5%. So we've seen about a 15 or 16% reduction in 2 years.
Council President?
I just wanted to follow up on something that you said in response to Councilmember Nichols' question about the child under 6. Is that what it is? But that can be not your own child. It could be like a grandchild or something. If you have a child under 6 that spends a certain amount of time in your home, that qualifies as well, even if it's not your own child.
That's correct, yeah. They have a, what they call a visiting child rule. So if the child spends, I believe it's 60 hours cumulatively over the course of the year visiting the home, often grandchildren or nieces, nephews that maybe are babysat by the individual, then that would qualify as having that child present. And you'd want to, the idea is to mitigate the lead so that a child frequently coming in contact isn't exposed to the lead dust. We also offer the grants on rental units up to 4, and the requirements for rentals is simply that the folks meet the low to moderate income requirements. So the child doesn't need to be present for our rental units. So if there are duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, we can mitigate the lead. Again, 100% grant funded. So often, if there's going to be turnover of a unit, it's a good time for landlord or property owner to potentially get that lead remediated. So they should reach out to us.
So I've had a lot of people ask me about the program, and as you've mentioned, one of the biggest problems is qualifying. A lot of people don't qualify on the income requirement. They make just a little too much, but also the child under 6 requirement, either they don't have a child that spends any time or it's not enough time to meet that requirement. But you are looking at, you're sort of making a list of those and having them be like the next priority if there's any money left after the people that do qualify?
Yes, so if the income qualify but don't have the child qualification, we can do 1 in every 10 of those homes. So 90% of our projects must have the child under 6 for single-family residents. The other 10%, they don't have to have the child requirement.
Okay.
And so we have a wait list. So if we finish 9 projects, the 10th house can be that. That one off the wait list. Wait list is getting a little bit longer, and it's getting harder to get those other 9 residents. So again, we would encourage folks to apply, see if they qualify. You never know, you might meet that threshold. And if you have the visiting child, that could help as well. So I really encourage you to reach out and try to apply to the program.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Mangum?
For rentals in this program, you said it was dependent upon the LMI. So is that based upon the owner of the property or the renter of the property?
The renter.
Okay.
The tenant, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Council President?
That just made me think of something. If it's the renter that has to qualify, does the owner have any say since they own the property? I mean, I would assume they would want it done, but do they have to give permission or, okay.
Yes, the contract would be with the property owner, and
Okay.
the contractor, and the city, but the qualification would be based on the tenant.
On the tenant, okay.
So on that, because it's based on the tenant, and you said so, and there's turnover, that's the perfect time for them to apply. So they're going off of the income of that unit, not the income, so the income that unit generates at that moment, or how exactly?
For vacancies, we would require the owner to certify that they would, for 3 years, attempt to rent that unit to someone who is low and moderate income.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, that makes sense, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. Heather, thank you for your dedication.
Oh, thank you.
and being there. This is not an easy committee to sit on, I know that, so.
I'm just thrilled that, this past year, or the past January, we just had 2 members renew their time. And so this next year, we'll actually have 4 of us have been through the process before, which every year you learn a little bit more. One more thing I just wanted to mention is that we are looking for ways to, like Linda was talking about, and you've been talking about with other things, get the word out to reach people that might qualify. And so hopefully I'll be working with Christine to see if we can't maybe blanket some of these. I know that they already do it, but blanket some of these LMI neighborhoods just to get people aware and to check to see if they do qualify.
Perfect. Absolutely, yes.
So a low-income family with a 7-year-old is just totally blocked out, like they can't.
Well, for the lead program specifically, they would be eligible for other programs, and including our CDBG renewal program, which is simply based on income qualification. So if they had like a furnace that needed repair or roof replaced, or even lead paint mitigated, they could qualify under CDBG's renewal program versus just the lead paint program.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Okay, council, before we jump into agenda item 6, I know it's the last one. Do we need a break? Or no? No, okay. We're going to plow through it. Then we'll move to agenda item number 6 is the sign code updates. Planning and Development Services Department staff members will be in attendance to present updates regarding the new sign code and receive council direction and feedback.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor and Council, thank you for your time this morning. My name is Jennifer Flynn. I'm the newest addition to the planning department. I've been the assistant planner now for about 6 months. I think I have my review on Monday, so we'll see how I do today. We're here to talk to you about sign code. Many of you have heard previous presentations on sign code, and you're well aware of the fact that we are rewriting our sign code, doing the best job we can. So the sign code rewrite has been motivated by a desire to simplify code so it's easier to understand and interpret for the planners, to respond to community feedback regarding signage, to make city sign code friendly to business owners while also maintaining the beauty of our community, and to respond to nationally recognized planning trends in signage code. It's been really impressive to see and hear how many community members care about signage. And we've been quite interactive with a lot of different groups throughout the community in regards to how they feel about sign code. Specifically today, we're here to look for your direction in moving forward with the draft that we've proposed. We want feedback proceeding with the off-premise sign cap and our illumination standards that have been stated in the sign code draft. If you don't mind, I'll present you with a brief history of what's transpired, I'd say, over the last year and a half regarding sign code, just to bring everybody up to speed and make sure we're all on the same page. So in February of 2023, the Planning Department staff presented to Mayor and City Council and the public survey results from the sign survey. Council showed interest in staff engaging in a sign code overhaul to reflect what business leaders, elected leaders, and residents of Pocatello want regarding sign standards within our city. Overall, findings of that survey showed that a majority of respondents dislike signage such as pole signs, billboards, and electronic message centers. Furthermore, temporary signage such as banners, sales, and yard signs did not receive good reviews. Respondents reported that wall signs, light pole banner signs, and monument signs are more desirable. Finally, a majority of respondents strongly agreed that they visit a business based on word of mouth, online platforms, or other tools at our fingertips. However, while respondents agreed that sign poles play a role in their decision to visit a business, it was the only category where most of the community disagreed and in regards to how they choose where to go. If you'd like more information on the sign survey specifically, please refer to the work session on February 9th, and we're also happy to provide you with any of the documentation that some of you might be interested in. In August of '23, the planning staff presented a heavily amended sign code that sought to find balance between residential concerns, business needs, and everything in between. This effort was focused on balancing business rights to advertise with the desires and interests of the community. Furthermore, this effort focused on making regulations more clear to everyone, whether they be an experienced sign contractor or a member of the general public. In November of '23, the Planning Department took the amended sign code to Planning and Zoning for a public hearing. During this meeting, we heard from a couple of community members and had large turnout from the billboard community. Staff notes from that meeting are available, as well as the Planning and Zoning minutes that are available as well. Based on input provided to by the commission during the November 2023 Planning and Zoning meeting, we decided that the sign code needed to be simplified and some public concerns needed to be addressed, and that's what brings us to where we're at today. Over the last 3.5 months, the Planning Department has worked to engage with small businesses, citizens, city officials, and everyone in between. Planning staff formed a committee that met twice to review city sign standards. This committee was made up of sign contractors, city planners, small business owners, a Planning and Zoning Commission member, the Chamber of Commerce CEO, and concerned citizens. We also met on 2 different occasions with billboard companies. This draft provides sign code that is half the length of the current code, and for the most part gives businesses more sign allowance than the current code. I also want to mention that the Planning Department interacts with sign contractors throughout Southeast Idaho from other states on a weekly basis. With the exception of billboard companies, all that we talk to have been in favor of this new code. We have multiple businesses waiting to submit permit applications until approximately the June 1st timeframe, when we hope that this code would be implemented. This code is more flexible and accommodates the uses we've seen advocated for in recent years. So you have a summary of kind of the comments that I've made, as well as the major changes that have taken place in this sign code rewrite. And I would just refer back to the questions that I presented to you initially, which are directly looking for your feedback on how to proceed with this draft of sign code. As you know, our next step, given your blessing to move forward, would be to take this to Planning and Zoning for a public hearing, and then following that would be back to City Council for another public hearing. So we're excited to hear your questions.
Brett McLean, Planning Director for the City of Pocatello. So I wanted to specifically talk about the cap on off-premise signs. This has been a point of great discussion, especially with the billboard companies. I've talked with them individually. We've met a couple times, as Jen has referred to. And so what we're proposing in the new sign code is a cap of billboards. So any billboard that exists now can stay and can be maintained. That's what we are proposing. Many of the billboard companies have asked that we implement a cap and replace program, which essentially would be, we cap the number of billboards at where they are, but if one comes down, they could move it to a new location. For me, my biggest concern with that is just the tracking of that, and how do you keep track of who has what rights to what billboards. It gets to be a gray area for me. I am not very in favor of that cap and replace program. I would rather just cap it and let those existing billboards remain, stay in good maintenance. You know, they can repair them, they can do the things to them to keep them in good order, but it would not allow them to move around town. But I did promise the billboard company that I would bring that up with you as a proposal from them, that they would prefer to see a cap and replace type program. There's a similar program that Boise is doing with billboards. It does require some level of tracking, and my worry is as staff turns over, as you know, years go on, how do you keep track of who has what rights to what billboards? And it gets to be something that in my mind is a difficult thing to regulate and control. But I do just wanted to pose to the council what direction you would prefer us to go with the off-premise sign regulation.
Councilmember Nichols and then Lyric, and then Paulson.
So with your proposed cap, could a billboard, say that was deteriorated, be replaced in its existing location?
Yes,
Okay, it just couldn't be removed and put somewhere else?
that is correct.
All right, thank you.
That's partly where I was heading or going to head. So when you say they can be with the cap that you're proposing, not the cap and replace, you said that signs can be, existing signs can stay and be maintained. And I'm just wondering, like, how we define be maintained. If it's really like falling apart, you know, or blows over or something, is that then considered, you know, putting up a new sign, or is that considered maintenance, or?
It would fall into very similar to what our legal non-conforming structure code would allow. So if there is if a sign, you know, blew over or got hit and it fell over, or if it needed to, even if they wanted to upgrade it so it was a more efficient sign, it would just have to meet the same size and standards that it currently is at. So if they couldn't enlarge it, they couldn't make it taller, it would have to meet the same standards that it has.
But they could upgrade it?
They could upgrade it.
Could you have a, I can't remember what they're called, but a static sign, non-electronic, change to be electronic?
That's something I think we probably need to discuss. If that's something that you were okay with, I'm fine with right now.
If that would be considered an upgrade?
And it's more about placement and size than what this is actually in the structure.
Okay. I did have one other question. I'm a little unclear on the cap and replace proposal, and I was wondering if you could just explain that a little bit more.
Yes. So the best thing I can do is reference what they're doing in Boise, because they currently have a cap and replace program. And so usually if a billboard is being removed, it's because a lease on a property comes up and the property owner no longer wants to renew that lease, and so they have to remove that billboard. There are instances where maybe it gets blocked by a building that gets built next door or something like that, and it's not an effective location for them anymore. And so the billboard company wants to move that billboard. So with the cap and replace, it would cap the number. Let's say we have 100 billboards in town. It caps that number at 100, so we can't have more. But if a billboard company chose to take one of those 100 down, they can move it to a new location and erect that billboard at that new location. It would require a demolition permit to remove the billboard, and that would be like their golden ticket to come back and construct a new billboard.
And if we went with that program, what say would we have as the city about
would-
the new location?
Yeah, we would probably maintain very similar standards to what we have now for our billboards, which limits where they can go, zone, proximity to schools and residences and things of that nature. So we would have to maintain those standards for those billboards and to determine where they could be located. That is fine. We can create standards. We have somewhat decent standards now that we could retain. But my biggest concern about it is how do you track if you had 25 billboards come down, how do you know who has which new billboard is replacing which old billboard, and have you used that one already? And so it requires some tracking and some historical record keeping that we have to maintain well beyond I'm even here, or Jen is here, and it's not just so there's a process that we have to implement, and then it essentially gives them a right to construct a billboard. And what happens if we change the code again and we want to do something different? And I just think it opens us up to a lot of issues of authorizing or giving rights to a use that we're committing to future governing bodies to adhere to. And so,
One last follow-up, if I might. With the billboards or off-premise signs now, my understanding was that we were sort of almost at our limit of allowable locations. So I see a potential problem if we do a cap and replace. What happens if we don't have any acceptable locations to replace, to move a sign to?
correct. And so they would just hang on to those
Rights.
rights to put that billboard up when they have an opportunity that arises to them. And as the city expands, those opportunities will expand. And there are opportunities within the city currently, but the property owners aren't interested in it. So if those property owners change hands, there could
An
be
opportunity could open up. Okay.
an opportunity could open up. But as we expand into north or south, some of these areas that we're growing into, those opportunities will increase. And so based on the feedback we receive from the community, there's a strong dislike for billboards. And that's why we're recommending this cap. And we recognize that there's been a significant financial investment into these structures. They do provide some value to the community, but it's not something that the community really wants to have. And so that's why we're proposing a cap, and they can continue their business as is. They can't expand it, but they can continue it as is.
Okay, Councilmember Paulson?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. I agree with your logic of the tracking. It's probably not very efficient to do it. If there's turnover with the city staff, employee, you name it, I agree with you.
Brent?
So could you define billboard, please?
Our definition is an off-premise sign, and
Right.
that includes billboards. And I can read you the definition. I think I have it here.
So the cap would apply to all off-premise signs?
So it applies to all off-premise signs. And so it says a sign for goods or services that are not located on the same property as the sign, or a sign that directs people to off-site locations. So most commonly, that is a billboard. But it would prohibit off-premise signs. Let's say I own a store and I have a pole sign, but I don't want to advertise my store. I want to advertise someone else's store. I can't use my sign to advertise someone else's store.
Okay, and those would be capped as well, regardless of size.
Regardless, that would not be
Okay.
an allowed thing to continue.
All right, and do you know how many off-premise signs we have?
I don't know the number right off the top of my head. Do you know how many we have?
I don't know the exact number.
Yeah. We'd have to figure that out, and we'll have to map where those are located on our GIS and just really establish our base. This is where we're set as far as.
And we do have them mapped. I just don't know the exact number, but we
Okay.
could get that information.
All right, and then just one more, under the cap and replace, has anybody, any type of a time frame on how long they would have to replace it? Say within 6 months or just in perpetuity?
Their proposal is in perpetuity. There's no cap on that timeframe. Now, if that's something you would want to entertain, we could write that into the code. If you want to say you can replace it as long as within 6 months, we could do something like that.
But if there's no location within that 6 months, then they lose that.
And I do know that in Boise, with the cap and replace program that they've established, the number of billboards have reduced because they are very similar where they don't have as many locations to erect new ones. And so the billboard companies are sitting on quite a number of these potential billboards that they can place throughout the Boise area if opportunities arise.
I have one more question about.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Mangum,
go
you
ahead.
can go first.
So what constitutes for the allotment of space for someone to erect a billboard?
What do you mean by allotment of space? Let me-
So we're saying
Location?
Yeah, location.
What's allowed?
What allows them the ability to erect here versus over here?
There's
Obviously,
an-
it's the zoning, but
It's a little complex. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's based off of zone first, and then it's based off of proximity to different things, whether it's residential zones, schools, cemeteries, parks, historic districts, churches, I think are another. And then also if it's within a certain distance of a residential district or zone, it has to go to a public hearing. So there's a lot of different things that go into the requirements of an off-premise sign right now.
okay. So you had mentioned a business marketing or advertising for another business on their sign. So like, say, for example, I have my sign here. I have my sign. This side is my business. And then Hayden's like, Corey, throw up something for my business on the opposite side. Does that qualify, or does that still fall within the purview of what you're talking about?
That is considered an off-premise sign still.
Okay.
Yes.
Even though I have my half,
Yeah.
that's advertising for
That
me
is correct.
specifically. Okay. So then another question, kind of shifting a little bit though. For the point of illumination, is that just the illumination on a sign specifically, or is that the illumination of a building also?
Just for the sign.
Just for the sign?
Yep.
Okay. I had someone who had approached me and they were upset, this person for signs, and they love signs. So they were a little upset. And they're like, well, the temple is illuminated like crazy. So does that fall under that same category? And I'm like, well, it's not a sign. It's a building. And so I just wanted to see if that was generally clear.
The
or
different part of the code that regulates building.
Okay.
lighting.
And I'm next. I wanted to ask about Northgate area specifically. That development was being proposed and new when I first got on the council. And my understanding, in all the discussions we had back then of how the developers were envisioning that was that billboards would not be allowed in that area. I don't know that that was ever a specific thing in code, but that was sort of the vision for that area. If we were to go with a cap and replace program, are we opening that area up to signs?
Potentially. So there's no city code that prohibits signs in the Northgate area. That's just the property owners who are making that choice. So if a different property owner came in and chose to put a billboard in that area, they potentially could. A lot of that property along Olympus, along Venture, and along Northgate are commercial zoned. And so they would be allowed to have, or potentially allowed to have, billboards on those if the property owners chose to put them on there. Now, there might be some restrictions based off of parks and residences and things like that that might push them away from certain areas, but it potentially could, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Brent?
So are you seeing any type of a trend statewide on off-premises sign? What are other communities doing?
Statewide?
Yeah, statewide.
Jim probably can give a little better answer on this because he's done more research into it, but I know Chubbuck has banned them outright. You can't have a billboard in Chubbuck. Twin Falls, I think, has banned them.
They've grandfathered all their current ones.
They grandfathered their current ones.
Is that considered a cap?
Yeah, essentially. What other communities? And I know some of the resort communities don't allow them. Other ones in Idaho that
The ones I'm aware of in Idaho.
and then I know
Meridian, Nampa, and Boise.
yeah, Meridian, Nampa, and Boise. I know Boise has the cap and replace program right now, but there is a trend nationwide of restricting billboards. There's 4 states that have completely banned billboards in the whole entire states. It's something that, and I can see why billboard companies are trying to really push back on this, and I can understand why. But it is, I think, even a nationwide trend of people looking at the impact of billboards, recognizing that they may have some value, but there's also some disadvantage to having those in your community, and people don't really like them. So,
Councilmember Mangum.
Can you give me some of the disadvantages of having billboards throughout the city?
So from what we've heard from people we've talked with, a lot of it is the visual clutter, I guess might be the best word for it. People don't like having to see them. A lot of people don't like what's being advertised on them. People don't like
Distraction.
a lot of it is distraction of driving, having a lot of different things happening as they're driving. And I know a lot of those, like the distraction argument, people will come back with studies and things that say that it doesn't distract drivers. And you can get information one way or the other, right, depending on which side you're leaning to. But that's a lot of what we're hearing. And one of the biggest things is just, especially at night, is how bright a lot of the billboards are. They're big signs. They're a lot bigger than a lot of just your normal signs that you find along our commercial corridors here in town. And we've had, just even this last week, a complaint about a new billboard that just went up and how bright it was, and it was significant. Now, hopefully we've resolved the brightness issue of it at this point. But it's stuff like that that is continually happening that people don't like. And so, but I think it's mostly a visual thing. As you're driving through the city, people don't want to have these billboards blocking the view of the city.
So, I have two questions. The first one is community input. How successful do you think you've been in getting community input and hearing what citizens have to say? It sounds like you've gotten some response, and obviously I know you've gotten some response from the sign companies, but what specifically are you hearing from the community? And are they truly engaged, or is it just like 2 or 3 people who are, having voice?
I think that's a very, very good question. So we advertise our survey on various social media platforms. We send out press releases to the traditional media outlets, and within 2 days of the survey being opened, we had 100 responses. And then by the end of the 4 weeks, we had just under 400 responses, which is rare for the city of Pocatello. People are passionate about signs in this community. They have strong feelings about it. And that's not a number to disregard. And I know it's only hundreds when we're talking about thousands of people, but I would consider that a statistically valid survey that represents the community. You could survey another 1,000 people and it probably wouldn't change the impact or what their voice is saying. Now, I understand that there are very special interests that don't like what the survey says, but that's what it says. And that's what we're basing this sign code rewrite off of.
So percentage-wise, how many are in favor of what the planning department is proposing?
So this was a survey that we put out prior to to the rewrite of the code, and that's what we used
to guide
our
proposal.
Our rewrite.
So,
and maybe to address that further, we then had multiple meetings with stakeholder groups. We met directly with billboard companies, and have garnered input and direction from lots of people in the community outside of the survey on the sign code. And we've made changes and alterations based on that, but also keeping in mind, we have this community input that we strongly feel is important to, as we adjust this code, and not adjust it just to the special interest groups that might have a different opinion.
Council President?
I just want to clarify in my mind something you just said. So you have made changes based on feedback you've gotten, and one of those changes, if I understand correctly, that you've made, because in a past presentation, we were saying, or you were saying, that if a sign, got blown over or fell into disrepair, that then that wouldn't be allowed to be put back up. So that seems to be a change to me now.
I want to be clear on that.
Okay.
That isn't a change. That's always been there.
Okay.
Now, if there's a sign in disrepair and a neglected sign, that is something different. And,
Okay.
And it either needs to be repaired and brought into a safe working condition or removed. And that's still in the code.
Okay.
But that's something different. That's just a neglected sign. But if it's a non-conforming sign and something happens to it, like it gets blown over, they can replace that.
Okay.
And
So
they've been able-
I'm misunderstanding then. I thought that was a way that we were going to that we were going to eventually sort of remove signs.
Yeah, but some of the biggest things that we changed and we adjusted were on the size and the placement. A lot of the business community said, we're struggling with advertising on our buildings and on our sign and on our frontage. And so we adjusted those numbers to make it work a lot better for these businesses. For example, what we first proposed was on a building for a wall sign, they could have one wall sign on the street that they're addressed off of. The new code allows them to have a percentage of their elevation can be covered in signage. If they have multiple signs, I don't care, as long as it falls within a certain percentage. And we've opened it up to all sides of their building, regardless of whether it's the side they're addressed. So if it's a corner building, they can advertise on both sides if they felt like it. And so we've opened up a lot of opportunity for the local businesses to advertise on their property. And I think that's a very important thing to understand with the sign code. We've given them a lot more leeway and flexibility in what they're doing and letting them govern themselves a lot more.
One more. That just brings up in my mind the historic district. And we know that the sign requirements in that area are different than other areas. Have you made changes to signage in that area? And is that being addressed in this rewrite?
Probably can answer that one a little bit better than I can. That's his area.
Yeah, the amount of signage allotted would be the same as what we're proposing. But what's different, we're currently going an overhaul of the design guidelines for downtown. And that will govern the placement on a building of where they go based off of the design of the building. And we currently have that in our design guidelines, but that would be a factor of, if the building's design calls for a certain location for signage, that's where it will go. The allowance will be the same as long as they can fit it within those areas that are appropriate for the historic building. And then we're still working out illumination type and all of that. But it will be under this as long as the proposed draft, as long as it meets the design guidelines.
Okay. And you're working on those design guidelines, so that's going to really kind of dictate what is allowed downtown.
Yeah, and this code draft points to those design guidelines to
Okay.
say these allowances apply to the downtown district as long as it meets the standards in the design guidelines.
Okay.
And I think another thing to note in regards to downtown and the historic district is we've simplified the process of businesses to be able to obtain a sign that we can do an administrative certificate of appropriateness for a lot of that signage downtown. Instead of it going to the Historic Preservation Commission, if we have these set standards and they meet those set standards, we're not making them go through a whole process to get approval. We can approve those just ourselves within the city staff.
That would be
And that
a
will-
big improvement,
It
I
will
think.
streamline a lot of what happens
Yeah.
with, especially signage downtown.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
So we just had an issue with the sign in Old Town that had to come before council. So is that process now streamlined for someone to repeal a decision in this? Or do they still have to come before council in order to get these different approvals or?
You are the appealing body. So
If it's an
for
exception.
all of our code, that if decisions are made and someone wants to appeal, it comes to you. So you get it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Part of the due process.
Right. I understand that. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can streamline certain processes. Like if there is an appeal or it has to be repealed by us or whatever, I understand that. But I'm just looking at is there anything that we can do to more simplify it or streamline it for certain processes? And I'm probably speaking completely unclear because it's rattled in my mind too, but you guys can decipher.
No, and I appreciate your comments, Councilman Mangum. We are trying to simplify that, changing or having the opportunity for the administrative certificate of appropriateness really simplifies it for these types of permits. And we are including sign permits in our new community development software so people can apply online and track the process of where their permit actually is. So there is going to be a lot more simple process for these applications.
Well, just a comment on that. I think that having that administrative certificate of appropriateness would hopefully, and I would imagine, lead to less appeals to the council, because I think it would just be clearer to people what the process is, and therefore, I think we'd see less of those coming before us, I would hope.
A lot of those appeals happen after the fact.
Yes,
So
yes.
if they followed the
Right.
correct order, then it probably would have fewer. So.
And so it really, many of them shouldn't come before us, but they have to because it is something that should never have happened in the first place.
So I just want to bring back to the original question I had. Do you want us to proceed with a cap on the billboards, or do you want to do a cap and replace, or how would you like us to proceed with that?
So I know I needed to step out for a second. We got legislators doing crazy things in Boise right now that we're trying to work with, and I needed to get a thing sent off to a committee, and so I apologize that I needed to step out. I did not hear the full conversation. However, I do know that we've got at least one council member that is not here that is in favor of keeping that in the code as presented to now, simply so that we can have the discussion during the public hearing comment period for the ordinance. And so my feel from what I've gotten here is there's a desire to keep that cap in place. And if I'm not seeing anybody say no, I would say we proceed that way on that question. I do have a question, though. We've got a letter here from the Northwest Sign Council. I'm assuming you've seen that letter. It looks like it was dated this morning, kind of a last minute. I don't know if we've had communication with them before or not, but there's some questions in here that I think are fair questions that we might want to be able to at least address during a public hearing, comment period, or at least a public hearing, so that some of them to me don't seem outlandish, but I don't know, I don't know if it's just, these are just general statements, and so I don't know. Have you heard from the?
Yeah.
You have, and
This is the second, at least the second response that they've given to us. And we've been sending them copies of our sign code for them to review.
Okay, so they've had that, and they've made some comments. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that we do have that, and that's something that would be important to have.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify about the cap, and I think you said this, that if we agree to keep that in place now, we still have a couple of hearings to go through, and
There's
so.
a public hearing process that we will need to go through, and during that public hearing
It could
process.
change.
It could change, but I do know that a couple of you have expressed an interest in keeping it so that we can have that discussion.
Right.
Ultimately, if it's pulled out, we
Then
can
we-
bring that back anyway, but
Right.
it's here, so.
But I just wanted to be clear that we're saying we're keeping it in place for now, but once we go through that process of hearings, like, we could reconsider and change that if we so chose.
I know that there's a desire for
Yeah.
that, and so.
Okay.
Your other question was, let's see, off-premise sign and then illumination.
Yep.
That's always an issue. I mean, we went through a 6-month process a few years ago on this. We had tours all over the place, and we had sign companies promise they would never exceed the
lumens,
and within 3 or 4 months, we had complaints of it happening, and I don't know how that happens. And I don't even know how we how we manage that, because it happens at dark and we're not out at dark. And so that's a difficult one for us, but I think that needs to be a point of the discussion also when we're there.
I will just add that, during the public hearing through planning and zoning, a lot of companies were saying it's problematic to turn these signs off, it's gonna damage our technology and reduce our investment, and so we just put it in there that they could dim them to a 0.1 candela, which essentially is off, that the signs likely will not be visible. But that's our way of listening to what they're asking for and trying to work with them, as well as work with the community in giving them messages from businesses when they're not in business, and when they're not open for business, the sign goes off.
I don't know if you've driven down Yellowstone at 2 a.m., but there's not a lot of vehicles driving up and down the street, so
Yeah.
Nobody to advertise to.
you're not seeing a lot of people to advertise. And I think most stores close before 11, and so if I need something, it's not gonna help me if I see a sign with it until the next day anyway, so.
And everyone who knows me knows I'm a night person, so I am somebody who's out at those kind of hours, and I walk at night.
Blew my argument there, so leave them on and turn them up, I guess.
Wait, you didn't let me finish. I'm not going to say that I'm looking at, oh, what business am I going to shop at tomorrow? It's very bright, a lot of these signs at night, and it's irritating. So when you're out at night and you've got, and I have issues, with eyesight too, that if I'm driving, it's more distracting and it feels a little more dangerous to have signs be bright at night. And I have to say, when I talk to people in the community, whenever we consider the sign code, and I think this is like my 4th time since I've been on the council, it's one of the most controversial, difficult issues that we deal with, strangely enough. But one of the main comments I hear from people is the brightness of electronic signs. And is there something we could do at night to turn them down? And I think the mayor alluded to this, the creepage, where originally the sign was within the requirement, but it slowly sort of goes back up. And I've noticed that myself being out at night, where it wasn't so bright and then suddenly it's blindingly bright. And that's the most common complaint that I hear from people. So I do like the idea of trying to consider some solution to that. If it's bad for the sign, to turn it all the way off. Can it be dimmed enough that it essentially appears to be off but doesn't damage the sign? I would like us to consider the idea of curfews. We've had sign companies in the past agree to turn down, way down, certain signs that had big complaints because they were fairly close to residential areas, like up in Highland, that kind of thing. So I know there have been sign companies willing to do that. I would like to consider that within our code, the idea of curfews.
We have a lot of signs that the sign companies, I think, get a black eye because signs are bright, but a lot of signs in our community are not controlled by the sign companies. And so unfortunately, they get a black eye when
it's the owner.
The owner of the sign thinks it's cool to turn it up so they can see it from Texas. And and that's a problem that we have also. And so this isn't all on the sign companies. We do have a couple sign companies in the audience right now, and they just raised their head. Real quick, I don't want you to come up, but just nod your head. Does it destroy the signs? Does it hurt the signs if you turn them off at a certain time? If there was a curfew at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, whatever that might be, does it really hurt the signs?
It depends. I think it's more of a maintenance issue with this brightness level than it is deliberate trying to make the sign bright. It's more of a maintenance. So a sign owner might neglect to maintain the sign, and that's why the brightness levels are so high, as opposed to let's crank it up It's not like just because your car can go over the speed limit, they're not deliberately driving over the speed limit. It's more of a maintenance issue. It's having malfunctions, and that's why the brightness levels are occurring.
So if we're, I guess my question, I didn't articulate it very well. If you turn the signs off,
Does it damage?
does it damage the signs?
I think it depends on the manufacturer of the sign. I don't see that being a major problem, but it could in some other applications.
Deloy?
I'm not a sign guy, but I'm a layout guy. And I believe the difference you guys are seeing is they can set up a sign, and if it's a company that has a dark image, like a Citizens Community Bank that might be dark red with dark colors or just a picture, it looks fine to you. But all of a sudden, someone throws a layout that almost looks like a whiteboard, that thing is gonna light up like crazy. So that's the difference is, they still might be conforming. So I think what you need to do is, in your code, you need to have a lumens where here's a maximum that you can have, because if I give you a layout for that digital board and it's mostly white, then that thing's gonna glow, you can see it all the way across town.
Okay.
I think that's a big difference.
Okay, I understand that, and I think I articulated my question, my real question, good enough on one, but Deloy, I think you may have misunderstood my question, and I appreciate your input on that. If we turn signs off, and I know you're not a sign guy, does that, you have customers that are though, does that destroy signs? You don't know, okay. All right.
And to his point about the changing of signs, I seem to remember, because we talked about that, and if it's changing from a darker image to a brighter image, I think that was addressed.
Well, we
in the
did talk about that,
discussion,
and that
yeah.
was, I mean, what he's saying is right. I mean,
Yeah.
the brighter the sign or the lighter the color
But
is
we
going
we
to
addressed
appear
that
brighter.
transition
so.
issue.
Yeah.
To answer that question, again, not 100% sure on how it affects the sign, like hard off and hard on. But a programming, just like a screensaver, you could program an ad to be dark. You know what I mean? Like, so
Sure.
it doesn't necessarily have to be a hard on or hard off, but if there was more to the extent of what are the illumins, if it's 0.1 or whatever, that can fade to a dark screen. It appears to the normal public that it's off, but it's just maybe a black image. That's
Sure.
the next frame that's being displayed on your computer.
Sure.
And
Okay.
that's very doable.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so I think we have direction on one. The lumens, do we have direction on what you want us to, what we want you to do there?
Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we'll go with as it's written unless we hear otherwise.
That's what I'm seeing up here as well, as it's written.
And as
Bring
it's
it-
written, there's a curfew, and it's down to 0.1 lumens.
Yes.
From 11 to 7, and that's just in accordance with our nuisance policy at the city.
Okay.
So it just follows those hours that are kind of noise.
Unless they're open for business.
Yep,
So if you have a business that's open 24/7,
you can leave it
they
on.
can leave their sign on
Yeah.
because they're open.
Okay,
And that makes sense.
that makes sense. Then Linda will know where to go shopping at
That's right.
2 a.m. when
Linda will know
she's
to go shopping. at
walking
2.
around when everybody
When I
else
need
is
my
sleeping.
candy bar on the way home from my
So,
walk.
okay, any other, council, we good?
What about the pole sign?
I scratched that.
Oh.
So, thanks for bringing it up. If you want to talk about it, we
Okay.
can, but we've addressed it in our code, and we feel confident with the way we've addressed it.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. You guys, this is important to us as it is to you, so we appreciate your attendance. Thank you, council, for being here today and everything. Council member Cheatham apologizes. He needed to jump off for some committee meetings in Boise. His is not one of the committees I was writing a letter to, just so you know. But we appreciate your attendance and we appreciate all that you do. Thank you very much, and with that, we are adjourned.